Hello and welcome back to WebUI test automation series. In this episode you will learn to locate HTML elements, interact with them, wait for elements to appear and understand importance of it, how to approach writing your own tests. Most importantly, you will also learn that neither framework nor library are the most important contributors to robust WebUI test automation. For that, we will write the same test using Robot Framework with browser library, Robot Framework with Selenium, Pytest with Selenium. Let's start with the big picture. And the big picture of WebUI test automation is that we have two components. A test framework that structures your tests and provides way of reporting results. You can think of them as providers of the test concept and syntax for it. A library, which you can think of as a gateway or driver to the vault of the web browsers via keywords or functions. A good framework will provide you with all the basics you need and will not limit you in any way. A good web library will have all needed bells and whistles for interacting with HTML. In this episode, we will take a look on two frameworks, Pytest and Robot Framework. However, one of my goals today is to demo that the framework is not any crucial element in the test automation. Now it is right time to throw in a disclaimer. Description of frameworks or libraries that I will present aren't written in stone, aren't final truth, maybe not even truth at all. Don't let my judgments about them affect you in any way. They are mine and mine only. Feel free to have your own opinions on these matters that may be completely different with mine. But as I already mentioned earlier, one of the goals for today is to understand that neither framework nor library are the limiting factors to good and robust test automation. The factor is you and you only. And so, no matter what we think about framework or library, the key is to learn to create good tests. And this is the road we are walking in this series. Now that disclaimer is out of the way, let's take a look at our frameworks. Robot Framework initially developed at Nokia Networks and made open source in 2008. It focused on keyword-driven and data-driven testing. It uses tabular syntax, can integrate with various tools and Python libraries. Pytest evolved from Pytesting tool, emerging around 2004-2005. Minimal boilerplate, supports features and plugins extensively, obviously can integrate with Python libraries, widely used for unit and functional testing due to its simple syntax and powerful features. There is probably endless list of testing frameworks. For the most part of our automation coding, I'll be using Robot Framework. Now about libraries. Let's start with the classic. Selenium has been around for quite some time and remains industry standard for web automation. When used with Robot Framework, we typically refer to Selenium library. The Selenium library integrates Selenium WebDriver with Robot Framework, providing a rich set of keywords. This means you can write your tests in Robot Framework syntax while relying on Selenium under the hood. Selenium is open source and has huge community. Because of its long-standing presence, it's one of the best supported options for WebUI testing. You'll find a wealth of documentation, tutorials and community examples to help you with your automation journey. Selenium supports all major browsers. It's also flexible in terms of programming language, Java, Python, C, JavaScript. Though with Robot Framework you will primarily write your tests in the Robot Framework's key-driven syntax. Being around for years, Selenium has robust solutions for many common problems in web automation. Next, let's talk about browser library. The browser library is based on Playwright, a modern browser automation framework developed by Microsoft. Playwright's architecture allows direct control of browsers via DevTool protocols, typically leading to faster and more stable interactions. Like the Selenium library, browser library uses keyword-driven approach in Robot Framework, making it easy to write tests in clean, descriptive style. The browser library tends to handle dynamic, Ajax-heavy pages with fewer synchronization issues because of its automatic waiting capabilities. Playwright automatically waits for elements to be ready before interacting with them, so you often need fewer manual waits in your tests. Now that we've outlined both options, let's talk about some of the differences you'll see when using Selenium versus browser library with Robot. Selenium relies on Selenium WebDriver protocols, which have been industry standard for years. Browser's library uses Playwright's single API that works seamlessly with different browsers, which can be faster and more robust in handling modern web app complexities. Both libraries use robot framework keywords. Selenium has long history, many keywords and practices are well established, and you will find extensive community support. Browser library keywords might differ slightly, but are similarly straightforward to use and have reasonable documentation. Selenium is highly reliable in most scenarios, although dynamic or complex web pages might need explicit waits or retry logic. A browser library often provides more consistent results out of the box, thanks to Playwright's inherent automatic waiting and direct browser communication. In conclusion, when it comes to robot framework, both Selenium library and browser library are powerful choices for WebUI test automation. Your decision will often depend on team preferences, the complexity of your web application, and the existing infrastructure. So both are powerful and have all that you need. If you are joining already existing project, you don't need to make a choice. Use already selected framework and library to give your best to the project, and this course is to help you with that. Shall you start a new project and make a choice? Do your own research, where the project roadmap is your best input. Let's make sure we installed needed software and libraries and finally start automating. To follow me, you will need to install Python, robot framework, browser library. For purpose of demonstration that there is no difference in neither framework nor library, I've also installed Selenium and Pytest. But you don't really need to. Maybe, however, install Selenium if project you are joining is using it. In your real work, you would also need Git, but Git is outside of scope of this course. For Python, you better install the version your project is using, or the latest one. Right now I have version 3.12.1. How to install Python can be found here. Links and commands are in the description. Or directly go to this link, select needed operation system and download it. Then install robot framework. The URL is long, but actual command is short. And then browser library. Do not forget to install Node.js as required. Use this link to install Selenium. If you want to install Pytest, use this one. If you want to automate in any other framework, install that one. Though I'd still recommend you to install one of these combinations, just for ease of following this material. After this course, you'll easily automate in a framework of your choice, just using different syntax. Now that we installed needed tools, open following: editor of your choice, page under the test, and the console. Let's begin with editor. Here I prepared a skeleton of the test, just an empty test that does nothing. In other frameworks it would look differently, in Robot it looks like this. If we look on a page we want to test, we find 4 relevant elements: header, username input, password input, login button. Strictly speaking, there are more elements here, but for our test, these ones are important. Let's begin with writing test that brings us here. Where exactly, you may ask? Exactly where we are now. The test that opens this page in a web browser. Just get to the to the web page. We'll need two keywords here: new browser and new page. Let's run it. No, first let's save it, and then let's run it. Well, that went way too quick. Let's add sleep here. And run again. Now that our test indeed lands on this page, we can think of user actions. And the obvious actions would be type in username, type in password, press login button. Let's see how do we add these actions to our code. For filling in text fields, there are two keywords, fill text and fill secret in browser library, and input text, input password in Selenium. We will continue with browser library. Both keywords doing the same, with exception that keywords for password do not leave password in the log file. As we discussed in episode 1, in order to interact with element, we need to locate it. That means that regardless of the library, Selenium or browser, keywords need to receive a locator. A locator to the element with which the keyword should interact. I'm happy to tell you that locating elements is easy. Easy when things done by right, and when they are not, it's still easy. Right-click on the element you want to interact with and select Inspect. You get to see HTML code around your element. What practical can we see here? First of all, double check that you landed on the element you expected to. It should be input in this case. Next, it would be good to find ID attribute. And yes, we have it. ID equals username input is exactly what we were looking for. Let's use it without hesitation. A pro tip that can save you time. Remember to verify your locator. Just type here hash and your ID. Why hash I'll explain in a moment. Then hit enter a few times. If your selection is not going anywhere, all is good. What we just did. We verified that there is only one ID with such value. If there would be more than one, selection would be cycling between them on your page. If ID is not unique, don't use it. Now we can use this locator in our test. Let's put their username like that. Next, we repeat exactly the same for password field. What do we see here? We see here ID again. Perfect. We could use it. However, for educational purposes, let's not use ID this time. Let's use CSS. And one option would be use exactly as before. Type hash and put this ID. Hash is indication of ID in CSS language. Another good option here is using class of the element. Let's inspect this element more. This element belongs to two classes, input field and password class. If we try use input field, we'll fail our pro tip verification. Let's see it. A dot is indication of the class. If we hit enter a few times, we land on several elements, which is not good. We need to find something else. Let's use password class. That works perfect. Let's use it. We type here CSS as indication of different style locator, and then type password. However, CSS allows us to be stricter with our locator. We can also include HTML tag into the locator. This way we define two conditions. It must be an input element of HTML. It must belong to a class password class. At this point, our test virtually filled username and password. Now it is time to hit that login button. And you know the drill, inspect it. Good news, it has ID. Bad news, we will not use it. Of course you could use it, but you guessed it. For the educational purpose, we will now use XPATH. It has same logic. Find a button with ID login button. In browser library, for clicking a button, surprise, surprise, there is keyword click. In Selenium, it would be click button. By the way, you can get help finding locator for your element. Do right click, go copy, select XPath. Similar you can get for CSS. This may or may not give you the best choices. For instance, this locator will fail our pro tip. Be careful when using these tools. Time to run our test draft. But before that, let's for now use field text instead of field secret, as it will require more arrangements to be done. It ran seemingly well and looked like it did the job, but only you know that it didn't really verify much. Now it is time to think again what our test will be really testing, or in other words, how strong test we want to create. Obviously, minimal requirement is to verify that our login attempt brings us to the welcome page. For educational purposes, let's also include verification of login spinner to test requirements. Let's find that spinner and make sure we'll wait for it to appear. We have ID spinner. Let's use it. What we have here, we're waiting for specific element with ID spinner to become visible within 3 seconds. Next, asserting welcome message. To get text of specific element, there is a getText keyword. As anything else, it needs a locator. Then we can add assertion operator and the value. That may work, but it will work much better if we make sure that this element is already visible. Let's run this test. What we just did, we made our test to be resilient. Test framework is way too fast in comparison to real web application. We could just use getText to verify what we needed to, and that might even work most of the time. After all, browser library has built-in weights. By adding this explicit weight, we're adding more control and stability to our tests, which will pay back greatly by having less false negative results, shall some delays occur either in application or in network. And for the final touch, I've added similar weight for input field to be visible. Now we complete a simple happy flow test. The fact that it is a simple one is on our side now. Why? Because now it is time to prove the statement I made in the beginning of this episode. Let's look at 3 different implementations of same test: robot with browser library, robot with Selenium, Pytest with Selenium. The one on the left we ran already. Let's run one in the middle. And then one on the right. They all work similar way. What is the difference? Difference is in the syntax and library keywords. Is it really important which syntax or library to use? Not really. Neither keywords nor syntax are important. Logic and efforts you put in your test, that's what matters. At this point, I consider the theorem that neither framework nor library are important factors to be proven. And because of that, to simplify my mission, I'll mostly continue with robot and browser library for visual clarity. We will come back to this test in a couple of minutes. Now I invite you to play more with CSS locators. Using CSS, we can start locating our element from elements higher in hierarchy. For instance, we could use form here. Or we could use a class name. Let's use username class. We can also use elements yet higher. This way you can precisely locate elements you want. If this page is redesigned, for instance, so that it has 3 divs under the body, and third div has a form under it, we could use this trick. We can say that use input which is under form under third div under body. For playing with XPATH, we could use a cheat sheet. We could do same as we just did for CSS. Use input under form under third div under the body. However, more practical locator would be like this. CSS equivalent of that would be like that. Note that XPATH a bit more demanding on the syntax. It will take a little bit of practice to master your skills of picking optimal locators, but I hope you already see that it is a creative process and quite easy one. Now that we have a minimum of our test, it is good time to think what is wrong with it and what can we do about that. There are many things that could be improved, and that will be done in another series. Still, let's improve something already today. Let's remove some of hard codings from our test. These are not final changes, it's just incremental step towards the better order. Most importantly, we got here easy control on a application address and the browser we want to test it with. In the future episodes, we'll look at testing of multi-language applications, support testing of multiple installations or servers, see what we can do to minimize test maintenance, and maintenance friendliness when maintenance is inevitable. We'll also look at more intricate scenarios of using XPath and CSS. Now you learned the basics of WebUI testing and should be already capable of automating tests on your own. Combine your wisdom with the test logic and you will be getting better and better results. Thank you for watching and see you in next one.